It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. President-elect Donald Trump has selected retired General John Kelley to head the Department of Homeland Security. Kelley is famously known for defending the force-feeding practices of prisoners held at Guantanamo Bay under his Southern Command. Joining us to discuss this pick is Dahr Jamail. He is an award-winning journalist, and he's the author of The Will to Resist: Soldiers Who Refused to Fight in Iraq and Afghanistan, and Beyond the Green Zone: Dispatches from an Unembedded Journalist in Occupied Iraq. His upcoming book is titled The End of ICE, that is forthcoming from New Press. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dahr.
My pleasure.
So John Kelley, retired general from the Marines, is appointed as the head of Homeland Security. Give us a sense of who this character is.
Well, as you mentioned, I think one of the more egregious things that he's known for is his open support of force feeding of inmates at Guantanamo Bay, and his rebuke of when human rights organizations and civil rights organizations have called him on that, he's basically laughed them off and rebuked them and called their claims ridiculous, that kind of thing's just not happening at Guantanamo Bay. He's also in favor, of course, not closing the prison as well as expanding it, and is a very hardline person as far as his border policies go. And it's important to bear all this in mind, because now he's going to be in charge of the almost 250,000 border security personnel at his disposal and other internal security personnel at his disposal. So, and then his policies are certainly in line with Trump's, where he's obviously anti-immigration and going to be used as a very effective tool in making the border much more militarized, as well as his draconian policies regarding Guantanamo. And then I think another important element to consider is what's that going to mean with the private prison industry in the United States. Certainly, it's going to be a bit of a boon for those investing. And there's a reason why the CCA stock, the company formerly known as the CCA, the Corrections Center for America, their stock literally went up almost 50% within days after Trump winning the election. So there's a reason for that, and I think bringing in Kelley is certainly showing people why that's happened, and certainly what Trump's policies are going to be regarding immigration and internal homeland security in the United States.
Right. This is the third general that Trump has chosen to join his cabinet, James Mattis and Michael Flynn for Secretary of Defense and National Security Advisor. Now, how should we interpret this? The previous interview I had done with Vijay Prasad, he said this is shaping up to look like the junta rather than the cabinet. Your thoughts on that?
I would agree with that statement. These people, I wrote an article very recently about retired General Mattis, because this is an individual, just to give you a flavor of where this is going. This is a guy whose name is Mad Dog, and it's because he's consistently shown a blatant disregard for human life during all of his time as an individual very, very high up in the Marine Corps. He made the quote that's now become famous in 2003, the year of the invasion of Iraq, where he said, it's, quote, "It's fun to shoot some people, you know, it's a hell of a hoot." He also, when he was asked during the invasion of Iraq what he was telling the Marines under his command, of which there was a large number, about how to behave in Iraq, he said, quote, "Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet." So this is the type of individual that Trump is bringing into a position of power. It's also worth noting that this is the guy who, in the wake of the 2005 Haditha massacre, which made international headlines when Marines committed a massacre of 24 unarmed Iraqis. We're talking about small children, women, elderly, even an old man in a wheelchair, all of which were shot at very, very close range multiple times. And then when the 8 Marines that were brought to justice, not justice, but were held responsible for committing the massacre, it was Mattis who was overseeing it, and he basically dismissed it. And these guys, thus far, all of them have gotten off without any charges. There's one that remains that could still theoretically be brought to justice, but we can now see where that's going to go as well. And then lastly on Mattis, I was reporting in Iraq at the time during both of the U.S. 2004 sieges of Fallujah, and many of the Marines involved in those sieges were under Mattis' command. And so that makes him responsible for giving orders and responsible for the behavior of those underneath him. And it's worth noting that multiple war crimes were committed during both sieges of Fallujah. I personally saw women and children and elderly being shot, ambulances being deliberately targeted by snipers, as well as missile attacks on them, clinics and hospitals being bombed by U.S. forces during both of those sieges, attacks on mosques, a long line of war crimes, including the use of white phosphorus, which is not an illegal weapon, but it's certainly restricted under the UN, and it's if they're going to use it where there's possibly civilians, it would be a violation of international law to use it under those circumstances. And by the Pentagon's own admission, in the November 2004 siege of Fallujah, 50,000 civilians at least remained inside the city, and yet the military went on and used it anyway. So under his command, just what I've seen personally, multiple war crimes have been committed. And this is the guy, again, whose nickname is Mad Dog, that Trump has brought into his cabinet.
Right. Pivoting to Kelley, one of the things, as you said, he's going to be responsible is for border security, which would be presumably help build the wall that Trump's been talking about throughout his campaign. Many agree that actually a wall already exists in areas that he's talking about, but the wall will also be largely ineffective. What do you think his reaction is going to be in terms of implementing Trump's will on the southern border?
Well, it's difficult to say at this point. I mean, because with Trump, literally he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth every sentence. So he's immediately in the immediate wake after he won the election, he was asked about the wall, and then he already, at least at one point, appeared to backtrack, saying, well, maybe parts of the wall will actually be a fence, and this kind of thing. So it's really difficult to say exactly what's going to happen. I think under Kelley, what we can see is certainly the private prison industry in the United States will probably swell, and we'll see an expansion there. I think, obviously, any idea of closing Guantanamo Bay prison can be left aside. That's obviously not going to happen. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see that expanded as well, and certainly more draconian measures on immigrants in the country, even those who are here legally. I think are going to be under threat and need to start taking some precautions of figuring out what they might need to do to protect themselves if they come under attack from this administration. I think it's not if. I think, unfortunately, it's going to be when.
Right, and then what's the likelihood of that his appointment would be actually rejected? Because I understand it has to go through a process to be confirmed.
Well, that's certainly a remote possibility, but given the way the government has reacted, certainly the Democrats specifically, on this type of thing historically, where there's tended to be a lack of backbone, and so anyone even remotely qualified without what they would classify as egregious reasons to not have them appointed, I think certainly are going to be passed. So I don't really expect any of these to be, these attempts to be thwarted. Of course, also helped along by the fact that the Republicans, thanks because of the last election, now control both Congress and the Senate. So I don't really see any of these being rejected
or challenged. I thank you so much for joining us, Dahr. I look forward to having you back more often on The Real News.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News Network.